Right, my name is Cyril Thomason and I was apprentice in the railway for a period of time during the war. The first encounter was as an office boy, which gave me the chance to move about in the factory and learn all sorts of different people. One of the things that we had to look to was the blackout. That was very essential, and they had to black out all the windows on the roof. That was permanent. But during the day we had to use the side windows, which had to be blacked out by panels that was made in the joiner's shop and was erected by many teams of men in each department. The war took a heavy toll of night duties and day duties. Men were having to work from 7 till 7 at night, and a shift took over from 7 at night till 7 at morning. Weekends were worked as well. This made it tiresome. We was walking about in blackouts at night, stumbling over everything. But we had other duties to do, the men in particular, was fire watching, which was essential. We did have many visits from the air raids, and of course they politely dropped incendiary bombs, but fortunately it was into waste ground. But nevertheless, these jobs had to be done, and they had to do the work of them during the day as well. So that became rather tedious and nerve-wracking and exhausting. During that time, we had to suffer all the arduous of war, which was rationing. That might have been the best diet that the BBC could put out just at the moment. I think it would, because we didn't do too badly out of it. I think in many respects it was a balanced diet as best they could. Couldn't get any bananas or oranges, that was out of it. But we did get rather nasty remarks coming through about the activities of the war during that time. We start off with the very 1st of September 1939. Well, military service was made compulsory between the ages of 18 to 41. September the 3rd, war was declared with Germany to mark the beginning of the Second Great War. And September the 4th, a German submarine sank a British liner off the Irish coast. Now we come to the first air raid on Britain, the 6th of September, which this town got mixed up with Norwich, because they flashed a signal up for Horwich to blow the sirens, but it was Norwich that was really getting the raid. So we had rather an interesting start to the war. I was working in the maintenance department, finally, after leaving the job as office boy, and I finally got in the maintenance, which meant that we had all sorts of activities in every department in the factory. So we was able to see the progress that was being made. I think the next thing is the rather sad visitation of rationing of butter, bacon and sugar. Then meat rationing. That came in 1940, January of 1940. British ships were fitted with devices to protect them against magnetic mines. And here's one. This March 1940, metal strips were put into the banknotes for the first time as a defence against forgery. All happened and all came filtering through and left everybody in amazement that we were surviving. I think that's about as far as we go at this time.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Who wants to follow on from that? John?
My name is John Roberts. I was born in Bolton and moved to Horwich when I was quite young, and I put my name down to join the railway. It was always my ambition to be a joiner, and I enrolled at the Horwich Works, and at the time of employment you had to do work at class as an office boy. I was in the general offices, and my foreman there was a gentleman who lived at the bottom of the moor called Gordon English. His wife was a teacher, if that's of any interest to it. And I was under Gordon for quite a few months. And his secretary was Doreen Walsh, who later married Will Tomkinson, the councillor's son. Anyway, after my after the 12 months, roughly, I think, of being the office boy, I got word that there was no vacancy in the joiner's shop, which disappointed me very much. But they said they'd put me in the erecting shop on section 5, which was the clothing section. And the foreman of the joiner's shop visited me and he said there might be a vacancy in a few months and you could be transferred to the joiner's shop. I was told that I'd have to serve my time as a fitter, which I didn't want, and I was on the point of leaving. And then the foreman of the joiner's shop, Mr. Greenelsh, he came forward and said there was a vacancy, so I was transferred then to the joiner's shop. Had a marvellous apprenticeship and enjoyed every minute of it there. And there's quite a good number of joiners employed, but the main one I came under was a man named Richard Ashcroft, which was a great man. He told me all about his apprenticeship, who a firm called Bentley's he served his time with from Bolton, and he did a lot of work for Lord Leverham when he was out of his time there. Anyway, like I say, I had a good apprenticeship under Richard, and I went with other certain joiners, but it always went back to Dick. I always liked working under Dick Ashcroft. I served my time out there. I was attending Bolton College for my City and Guilds and National, which I got there, and I was deferred from the army then, from the national service, till just turned 21. So I went and joined, I had to enrol at Preston Barracks under the Loyal Regiment. I did 2 years and just missed going abroad at Trieste, where the battalion was. So we had to stay in Barnard Castle in County Durham. On returning from the service, I was demobbed on the Thursday, and Mr. Greenelsh came round, my old foreman came round to see me on the Friday and said I could have my job back if I was interested. So I took him up on that, and it was Horwich holiday, the start of Horwich holidays, the Friday when he came. And I can always remember he said, well, we want some joiners to work over the Horwich period, you can start Saturday. So I came out of the army at Thursday and was working at Thursday, and I stopped there for the rest of my life. But I enjoyed the joiner shop. It was a good place to be.
Okay, right. Pat?
Well, I won't be telling you much about the work that went on in the works, because I worked in the offices.
Just say who you are.
Oh,
first
sorry.
of all.
My name is Pat Woods. Formerly I was Pat Lawler when I worked on the works. I started in 1941 when I was 16, and in order to get a job in the offices you had to take an exam at Hunt's Bank in Manchester. But unfortunately, oh no, not at Hunt's Bank, it was on the an office on the what's the station? Victoria Station. But unfortunately it had been bombed, so I finished up taking mine in on a siding in a carriage, a railway carriage. Anyway, I must have passed it because I got the job. But I was very disappointed when I got word to start, because I wasn't in the main offices where they worked from 9 till 5. I had to work in a little office called the CO. It was like a hut. And the inspectors used to use it. I think they sat there when they weren't down in the works. I don't know what they did. But we were about a dozen typists at the top end of the room under a man called Harold Lomax. And we had him round our little finger. I found the work very boring because all we were doing was typing things called requisitions and wage tickets and things like that. But after a couple of years, they suddenly promoted me to be conference secretary. So every morning I had to go about 11 o'clock to go in an office, and it was Mr. Macpherson's, who I was very frightened
Chief
of.
Inspector.
Was he? I don't know. He was the head one anyway, and all the foremen sent representatives from every shop, and they sat round and talked about boring things again. And then I had to type all the minutes out and onto wax, and they had to be reproduced and copies sent round to every department before I could go home. And one night I was going out somewhere with my new boyfriend Jack Woods, who I'd just started going out with. So when I went to the meeting, I asked them, particularly Harry Lucas, who represented the erecting shop. I said, please don't send so many things today. I want to get off early. And of course he had to be awkward, and he did twice as many. So I was so blazing that at the end of the meeting, when Mr. Macpherson had gone out, I picked my shorthand book up and threw it at Harry Lucas, and he finished up with a black eye.
Oh.
But he took it all in good part, so that was all I remember about that. But years and years later, long after I was married and back up here, about 15 years later, I was going round Bolton Town Hall with a group of ladies. We were being shown round, and we came to one office and they said, oh, in this room it's the mayor and his assistants use it. So they knocked on the door and let us go in, and lo and behold, it was Harry Lucas who was the mayor. And as soon as he looked round, he said, oh, I know that young lady, she once gave me a black eye. So he never forgot about it.
Oh.
Then we got moved up we did eventually get moved up all the lot to the main offices, and the inspectors went into one called the production office, and the typists went into the typing bureau under a lady called Florrie Wyatt. Yes, and we didn't have as much fun there because she made us work hard. But I always managed to get out of things and wriggle out of things. I know I got into trouble a few times. Can't think what I did. Oh, once when it was snowing, I lived up at Fall Birch with one of my aunties, you see, and so it snowed very bad and the trams couldn't run. So I got up in the morning and I thought, well, I'm not going to work. I'm not walking to work in all this. So I stayed off. I thought I'll go this afternoon when the trams start running. Anyway, they started running about an hour later. So I got on the tram and went into Bolton and had a look round there. And then I got on the tram coming back. And who should be on but a bloke called Robin Wood, if anybody remembers.
Yes,
Robin
I do,
Wood.
yes,
He was some sort of a boss, I think. And he must have seen me. So when I went to work in the afternoon, he sent for me, wanted to know what I was doing when I should have been at work. So I made this. I'm very good at telling lies instantly. So I said, well, I hadn't got any shoes to walk through the snow with, so I had to go into Bolton to buy some boots to come to work. So I got out of that with him. Then I left to get, when I was 1947, I won't say how old I was. I got married, and I was leaving. You had to leave then when you got married after the war. They wouldn't employ married women, but I was leaving anyway because Jack was then working down in London for the railway down there. So I left then, and that was it.
Very good. Right, well, my name is Chipperbottom, nee Griffin, and I went on the works, I believe, between 40 and 41, for the simple reason my dad wouldn't let me go in the forces. He didn't think that I should have gone in. So I started work in the machine shop office, and that was very good, also strange after working in a mill, but I enjoyed it. Then after that, I was moved upstairs, which was where Mr. Williams was the foreman, and that was much pleasanter up there. It was quieter, and I think we dealt with the wage cards from the chaps that worked for me now. What were they called? Estimator. Yes, estimators, weren't they?
Some were, wasn't estimated. Time clerks, weren't they, off the shop when they submitted the yellow cards to you?
Yes, yeah. Also, most of us had a clock to record, you know, where the men used to clock in and out. And if they were late, they were quarter hour. And from there, I went to the paint shop. Someone was off there and we used to just move you around. But I should have said this before. When I was there, the first week in the where I was working in the machine shop office, my dad rung me up to see if I was all right. And as I picked the phone up, I just fainted. I'd never seen a telephone or even, you know, answered one. And they were all laughing, but that was how it was. And then eventually I was moved up to the production office. That was quite a nice office, wasn't it? Pat was in the same office. And they were to have some characters in there. Roy Yates, Giles Worthington, Frank Lewis, the cricketer.
Stevenson.
No,
So-
Harry somebody. Not remember him.
Not Harry Blundell.
Harry Blundell,
Oh, Blundell,
yes. And Harold Sandbrook. There was a whole lot in, and it was a jolly office. Really good. Yeah. And then, of course, eventually I got married, came back off my honeymoon, and my notice was on my desk. So we went up to see, I can't remember his name, it wasn't Joe Haslam, I don't think, in those days. Frida Settle and myself, and we got 6 months. We could stay another 6 months. That was the end of my time on the railway. But I must say I enjoyed every minute of it. It was wonderful.
Right. Very good. Bill?
Yeah. My name is Bill Woodward. I started on the Loco Works in December 1945. I was first of all, we were told to report to the General Officer at 8:30 on Monday morning, and Harry Hayward was there in his black suit with silver buttons. We all lined up and we sat on the little bench at the side, and then they called up sent one of us through. They sent the messages through, and one chap came up from me, a boy called Ken Berry, says, "You're going in the telegraph office." Well, fair enough. So I followed him down. I was introduced to a lovely lady called Miss Stott. Now, me being a broad Lancashire lad, she said, your accent's not right, I want you to speak properly. And she trained me how to speak. And she's done, and I owe a great debt to that lady.
Yeah.
I was taught round the works with the office boy first, as an office boy myself, all the various places. The first time I went into the erecting shop, and then also to see the big, and I was only small, see the whacking great wheel, I was rather overawed. And then she took me, then I had to go to Mr. Sam Stone's to deliver telegrams. Sam Stone's was in the outdoor station box, it's not a station box really, a little box on the outdoor traffic superintendent he was, and of course there was an engine right at the centre, old saddle tank, and it just blew off steam just as I passed it. They deliberately did that just to frighten us, and to let the steam right way inside of you. It's really frightening, and I jumped out of my skin. So really, that was it, and then I went and learned the Ericsson switchboard. Now, and then with that you had telegraph lines to all the communication, the linesmen on the line for hold-ups in traffic, and if the signals were down or things like that, you were through to the gantries and the signal boxes, the telegraph linesmen they were called, and they looked after the lines, but the gangers and all the chaps who did all the groundwork, we were through to them as well. Used to have to pass telegrams to them as well. So that was my first introduction for 2 years, and then I went into the pattern shop under Mr. Arnold Greenhalgh, and again with Mr. Harry Jones, who sat at my side here, and they taught me all I knew, and I had a hard apprenticeship. I was called various names, agreed at the time, hard at the time, but very deservedly at the time too. We were taught to sharpen tools, read drawings. Well, this came eventually as you work your way through. And that apprenticeship stood me in very, very good stead throughout my later life. I had to go in the army like John did here. I got my deferred apprenticeship, as we all did, on trades. and then I went in the army into the RAMC. I was asked why did I wish to go in the RAMC? I said, well, I've been on the Loco Works, I've seen a bit of blood sport, I want to see a bit more. Unfortunately, that was only too true, but I'll go into that another time, because we're at the disaster at Farnborough, just 1954 when that happened. But, sorry, before, 1952, let's get it right. So really, then I came out, came back into the pattern shop in 54, stayed another 12 months, and then Dr. Beeching was beginning to swing his axe. And then I was told, oh, there's not much for you really. You're opening the mechanised foundry, and I worked with Harry on doing the number plates and chairs, and really, then I went to de Havilland's. So that closes my story really about the Horwich Loco Works, but it was an excellent place to serve one's apprenticeship, and I have never ever regretted going on there. My family was been on there before me, and my father was mortified when I applied to leave, or said I was leaving, but however, things turned out for me reasonably well. Thank you very much.
Okay, Harry, you're on.
My name is Harry Jones. I started on the Loco Works in early 1935 in the iron foundry. I worked in the iron foundry for 6 months, and then I was transferred into the steel foundry as an apprentice steel moulder. I worked there with a lad named Harry Fletcher, who was my mate. He was in the RMI band, and which were many of the steel moulders at that time. And to be honest, at dinner time or break time, they used to sit down on the haunches practising, and I could see them now, many of them, like this, or depending which instrument they were playing, bringing a little bit in. Probably that's where I got learnt a lot more of my brass band work and got more interested in it. Anyhow, following the transfer of steel foundry to Crewe, which at that time was being reorganised on the old London, Midland and Scottish Railway, which the L&Y became part of in 1926. My honest opinion is that was when the downgrade of Horwich Locomotive Works was started, because he transferred the forge and the steel foundry, many parts of the brass foundry and iron foundry, down into Crewe, and no doubt many other shops also lost their bit of work. Anyway, that was a long tail story. I finished from there when they went, and of course being a young apprentice, only 16, I wasn't allowed to go, along with another lad, and we were pushed back in the iron foundry again, making firebar moulds, which I did for a while, and then a vacancy came up in the joiners and pattern shop. I think my mother had given one or two of the chief foremen around the houses a few times, because she used to repair the clothes for them and one thing and another as I saw. I'll not say much about that, but there were many fellow foremen went round at that time with the shirt laps round the neck. She used to make collars and loose collars in those days, you see, and that's where the collar got warped on the buttonhole.
Yeah.
So we went back from that, and I went then and finished up in the pattern and joiner shop, and I worked in the pattern shop until I was 21 under the foreman, Mr. Arthur Riley, who at that time was also the secretary of the band, the RMI band. And then all the lads in the shop were called up into the forces apart from myself. And he could never understand this, and I think to some degree it aggravated him a little bit. But there's another bit of a story attached to that, which is another thing. But to cut that little bit short there, I used to play the piano accordion. And at that time, the sawyer in the shop, his daughter played the piano accordion. And Arthur Riley tried to get us both together to play together. Well, although I'd played with her a few times in a home, playing the accordion by the way, I wasn't for this and I wouldn't do it. I said no, and he had 2 or 3 do's at me and I said no. So I think that was the reason why he got shut of me when I was 21. Anyway, under the act that was then appertaining that, I was transferred to Craven Motors there during the war, and then from there was moved again to Leyland Motors again during the war, and came back on the Loco Works in early 1945 when Arnold Greenhouse was then the foreman. By the way, Arnold's father, Billy Greenhouse, was a charge hand when I was a lad. And from that we worked in there for quite a while until the mechanised foundry opened. And then by good luck or good management, I don't know, I was one picked on for the modernisation of all these patterns and core boxes for the new method of production in the mechanised foundry. Well, that meant to me going around different works. Oh, by the way, I was then sublet to the drawing office, and that meant going around all the works, collecting the drawings of their old brake blocks and chairs and whatever they've got, and bringing them all together. And then, along with one of the draftsmen in the drawing office, was to put all these, which is a similarity of blocks together, and whatever it was, they were all doing the same job, but were all different brake arrangements. So that finished up with me, like when I went back in the shop after about 6 months. I've been in charge of this pattern, they're making patterns and equipment for the mechanised foundry, which I really enjoyed. It meant all sorts of hours, of course, sometimes up to 9 o'clock at night, depending just the experiment that they were doing. And yeah, that finished up when it got going. And I was then reverted back to my old job as a wood pattern maker, because there was a barney going on between wood and metal. But I'll not go into that one because it left a few pleasant memories, some bitter memories of one or two gentlemen, I'm afraid. Anyway, following that one we came back, and I worked at my old trade for quite a while. And then I was sublet then to the inspection department as a deputy inspector, which I did until the inspector concerned died. And I played for his job and got it. The chief, by the way, was Jim Colvin, who was a grand bloke who lived across from us in the shop when I was a lad, across from in Seaman Street. Well, he married one of the girls from there, that's how I got to know him. And he was a decent fella. So I worked with him for quite a while. And then it came out that the Works Training School opened, come to be on the beam. And they had interviews for the candidates who were going to be instructors in the Works Training School, of which Pat's husband Jack was one, of which there's 2 or 3 photographs of that. That was a bit of a quirk, I always said, in my opinion, because we had the interviews, but I didn't get the job. When I went back to tell in the office, you know, and Jim Colvin was there, and he said, "Why not?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. Just that one of these things, I suppose," which they couldn't understand from their point of view, because they'd all come to all, they'd recommended me. But following that one that came on, the chap that got the job, when he found out that he had to go away on the 6 weeks training course for methods of instruction of lecturing, which we all had to do, which I photographed on, and no doubt Jack's wife Pat's still got hers. And he ducked out, as we used to say in those days. And I remember again, I was in the foundry inspecting, we had a phone call, the foreman come from, and he said, "You wanted upstairs." I said, "Well, what's up?" He said, "Oh, well, you wanted upstairs. I don't know what it's all about." Anyway, when I got there, and got back up there and saw the works manager, he said, "You've been appointed to this job." So I was a little bit flummoxed about this, like. Anyway, I said, "That's all right." So I took the job on. We did this 6 weeks training course. I was then, because of other trades that I was expected to give training on to the lads in the school, I was sent to Derby Carriage and Wagon Works and spent several weeks there on painting and sign writing, learning the techniques and one thing and another. And then I came back into the training school at Horwich, but at that time it wasn't open. And we were all in a wood nut, as we called it, being taught one or two things and learning a few things also. And Harry Blundell, that's then, as Pat has mentioned before, was appointed as the chief instructor. A name which I don't think he really liked as chief instructor, because he was never on the shop floor, he was always in the office, he was over the training school. And we followed that one out. And we did that for quite a long time. And then, again, accidents happened, I call them in those days, or coincidence, or whatever you want to call it. But then it did happen that the foreman in the joiner's shop, who John has mentioned, Arnold Greenhouse, became very ill and he was off work. He was off work for about, I don't know, 6, 9 months, something like that. And I was railroaded to go in as the foreman in the joiners and pattern shop. Since I only found out after that the works committee had had many meetings with the management who would not accept any other foreman, anybody else with a foreman's job in the joiners and pattern shop, because he'd no experience in it. So I did the job for about 9 months, and then Arnold came back again, and I was being reverted back to my old job. But before that actually happened, there was a new post created, Assistant Chief Inspector. Why, I never knew. But anyway, I was sent for and I was given the job. So I did that job for quite a while. And we got on very well with that. The job I really enjoyed because I met all my old mates that I'd trained with before that knew offhand. And they all knew me, so there was never any argy-bargy on anything. They all knew one another. And we got on very well with that. And that went on again for quite a while. And then again, coincidence again comes up. Poor old Arnold Greenhouse went missing for some particular reason. And then he was found dead on the moors, like, and I was part of the search party that did it. But apart from that, the job was advertised again. And of course I applied for it, and I got it. After a bit of argy-bargy on a few other things. And I did that job for quite a while as chief foreman in the joiners and pattern shop. It was split at one time. Part of the pattern shop side was split and put under the foundries, which I always thought was a bad move. And of course then I lost the joiners shop administration side and all the roof work and all that. That was given over to another department. But after a while there was some difficulty there. I never found out what it was. But again I was sent for one day and the boss told me, he said, well, you know, the chief foreman in the joiners and pattern shop again. So I just said, why? He said, well, you know, he nearly said, well, the less you know, the better. You're back to doing your job as you did before. So I did that for 3 or 4 years. Then again, coincidence comes into all these sort of things. Or else I had a guiding spirit, I never knew what it was. But it happened that the superintendent's job came loose in the machine shop, which covered the machine shop and all the production shops. And it was a bit of a problem for management for some extraordinary reason. I never found out why again. And I was asked to do the job. So I did do, and I did it for about 2 years on a temporary basis, and then it was put up permanently. And I, along with many other people from other centres, applied for the job, and we all had interviews. And weeks went by, and we never heard anything. So at the finish, I went back to my old boss, Jim Colvin. I said, Jim, what's going on? Like, what's this all about? Which I don't know, I'll find out for you. So he did find out, and it was said that there was no suitable applicant. So I said, well, that's a bit of a bombshell. I've done this. Anyhow, I said, that's beside the point. We've done it, that's it. So the job was being re-advertised. So it was re-advertised, and I didn't apply for it. And the assistant works manager sent for me. He said, why haven't you applied for this job? I said, well, if I wasn't good enough at first interview, you know, I can't be good enough at second interview, and that's why I've not replied. As far as I'm concerned, I want to go back on my own job, and the sooner the better. And he kept talking me around a little bit, and he said, well, stay there and whatnot. And he come back with an application form. He said, here, fill that in. I said, what for? He said, for this job. I said, I've told you, I know about it. Anyway, it finished after persuasion. I filled it in and shoved it in. And I heard nothing for a few weeks. And then suddenly I got a letter saying I'd been appointed to the job. So that's how I became one of the head lads, as you might call it, on British Railways at Horwich Works. Many other things I could say like, but I think that's good enough.
Thank you, Rory.
Yeah.
No story of a man that walked into that, because it was floor level. You'd no particular yardstick or what lines at all, because it's so filthy, and he walked into that.
I remember a lad walking the bucket or whatever it's called, where the metal was in,
Pouring.
the pouring. He was going along and he came to tilt the bucket ready for pouring into a mould, and he tipped it over too far. There were some young lads actually, but in the iron foundry this one, and it was in one corner, and one gentleman right in the corner, and the metal were flowing towards him. It was on a earth floor, isn't it? You know, sandy earth, and he just took one leap to try and get away from it, but he had to tread into the metal, burnt out. 1 foot, he badly burnt.
We
Well,
used to
I
have
can't
some
remember
of
its
this also
name.
in the steel foundry. It was poured when it came to casting. You didn't pour it. It was in a big tub, and they had a lever which pulled it up. Well, the plungers went into a plug hole, and they pulled it up to run them. But many a time that got stuck when he was coming. Well, if you imagine a chest coming in the diameter of that, what that is roughly, and that's from there to there, full of molten steel, and it used to be then what we call a running stopper. And they used to cry all over then, running stopper, run for so and so life. That's where he got his name from, I think.
Oh.
And it did, and it kept running and running and running till it was empty. There was no way of doing anything with
No,
it. It just
no.
had to run away.